Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're going to unpack something truly fascinating. We interact with laws, rules, and regulations every single day, right? Think about a local noise ordinance, maybe a property line dispute with a neighbor, or, even the tax code. But have you ever stopped to wonder where the rules governing all of that actually come from? Today we're going on a journey to explore exactly how legal concepts are born. And spoiler alert, it's not from dusty old books, but from raw lived human experience.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our structured roadmap for today. Number 1, how legal concepts are born. Number 2, the 7 stages of law. Number 3, journey through 5 windows. Number 4, the ASHA triaxial evaluation. And finally, number 5, the cycle of renewal. Let's get started.
Section 1, how legal concepts are born. We're going to dismantle some of our basic assumptions about the origins of rules.
So, we often mistakenly assume laws just kind of magically appear fully formed, right? Like they're written by a politician in a Capitol building or handed down by a judge in a courtroom. But honestly, that skips the entire beginning of the story. To truly understand the rules that govern us, we have to ask this fundamental question. How does a human experience actually become a legal reality? I want you to frame the law in your mind right now, not as dry ink on paper, but as a living, breathing byproduct of human life. It's something that grows entirely organically out of the everyday conditions, struggles, and interactions of the people it actually governs.
To analyze this, we're going to look at a framework called the Persian Renaissance. This methodology, which echoes some really ancient concepts of systemic order and renewal, gives us a unified lens built on 3 interconnected pillars. Think of it like a complete lifelong medical chart, but for a law. Just like a doctor wouldn't treat a symptom without knowing a patient's history, we can't understand a law without looking at its birth, diagnosing its current health, and figuring out how to reconstruct or heal it when it breaks down. Today, we're paying special attention to that very first pillar, the birth.
Moving on to Section 2, the 7 stages of law. This is all about the literal genesis of legal concepts.
I absolutely love this quote from our source text because it completely shifts our perspective. It says, "A legal concept does not emerge fully formed from legislation or judicial institutions. It begins within human existence itself." Every rigid, formal institution you see around you originally started as a messy, fluid, lived human experience. If we try to analyze a law without understanding the human condition that produced it, we are totally missing the point. The law is literally just human life, formalized.
So, how does that formalization actually happen? Well, it all starts with human existence, just people sharing a space. Let's imagine a small community situated near a river. Suddenly, there's a terrible drought. That becomes a lived experience, a recurring, shared problem for everybody. People intuitively realize they can't just take unlimited water anymore. That's what we call intuitive apprehension. They realize, hey, we need a standard here. This leads to conceptual formation, where they actually structure the idea. Okay, let's ration the water. Once the village adopts it, we get social recognition. Taking only your fair share becomes the expected habit, which then hardens into a normative order. And finally, they appoint a village council to enforce those rations, becoming a legal institution. It's just a spectacular step-by-step evolution from a raw, lived reality into a formal rule.
Section 3, journey through 5 windows. We're looking at conceptual deconstruction and reconstruction.
Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens to a rule after it grows up and enters the real world of institutional life. It's fascinating to realize that legal concepts are not static objects. Once they're born, they develop a really complex, highly unpredictable history. They acquire new meanings, different interpretations, and most importantly, distortions over time. A concept that made perfect sense when it was born can completely lose its way centuries or even just decades later as society changes around it.
To figure out exactly what happened to a law after its birth, our framework provides this 5 windows diagnostic method. This basically turns us into legal detectives. First, we look through the root window. Where did this actually come from? Once we know that, we look at its historical function. What specific problem was it trying to solve back then? Then we check for functional drift. How has it strayed from that original purpose? Next, the modern equivalent. What does the structure look like today? And finally, the operational principle. If we strip away all its historical baggage, what is the core, essential truth we actually need to preserve moving forward?
Consider the stark contrast between a law's original intent and what it eventually becomes. On one hand, you have the historical function, the pure, protective purpose of the law. But over time, we inevitably see functional drift. Think about urban zoning laws, for instance. Originally, their historical function was deeply protective, keeping highly polluting, dangerous factories away from residential neighborhoods. Makes sense, right?
But fast forward 50 years, and those exact same zoning structures are sometimes used to block affordable housing or small businesses, which completely disconnects from their original protective intent. Understanding this functional drift is how we realize a legal concept has totally detached from the people it was meant to serve.
Section 4. The Asha triaxial evaluation. This is how we determine functional legitimacy.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we give a matured law its ultimate performance review. To determine if a law is actually healthy today, it must satisfy 3 strict criteria in a very delicate balance. To pass the Asha triaxial valuation, which is named after an ancient concept of truth and right working, a law must deliver equal parts predictability, viability, and synergy. If even one of these elements is missing, the entire legal order is fundamentally unstable.
Let's break down what these slices actually mean for everyday people like us. Predictability means the law creates a stable environment. You know exactly what the consequences of your actions will be. Viability means the law is connected to human reality. It has to make practical sense in the real world, not just theoretically on paper. And synergy means the rule actively generates trust, cooperation, and productive interaction among people. It's absolutely crucial to understand that missing just one of these causes the whole system to fail. For example, a tax law might be perfectly predictable and totally viable for the government to collect, but if everyday people perceive it as deeply unfair, it actively destroys trust. It fails the synergy test and the system fractures.
Section 5. The cycle of renewal. Synthesizing the 3 pillars into a single movement.
Let's move to this next part and see how this builds together into a beautifully cohesive system. We start with the 7 stages, the genesis, tracing an idea from human experience to institutional birth. As time passes and society shifts, we apply the 5 windows for a historical diagnosis, checking for that functional drift we talked about. Then, we rigorously evaluate its current health with the Asha triaxial. And if it falls short, well, we don't just scrap it. We move to renewal and reconstruction, which generates an entirely new legal experience for society. It's a continuous, living loop of systemic repair, ensuring the law actually grows alongside humanity.
To summarize the core thesis we've covered in this explainer, a legal concept just cannot be understood without knowing exactly how it was born from lived human experience. It can't be properly evaluated without knowing how it is developed and inevitably distorted over time. And it cannot be reconstructed without rigorously testing its true functional legitimacy. The complete life cycle is an unending engine: birth, development, distortion, evaluation, and ultimately renewal. Law isn't a fixed destination. It has to be constantly reconstructed to stay connected to actual human existence.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Take a look around at the rules, regulations, and institutions in your own community right now. Do the legal concepts governing your life still produce a functional, predictable, and synergistic order? Or have they drifted so far from the human experience they were meant to protect that they are desperately due for a renewal? Keep that diagnostic lens with you as you navigate the systems in your world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.